podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, health, tax, professional advice. We're not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of this podcast. This podcast is not intended to replace professional medical advice. The views expressed in this podcast may not be those of the host or management. This podcast may contain adult themes, so parental discretion is advised. Today's guest isn't just a survivor. She's a spiritual led powerhouse who turned bankruptcy, near-death surgery, and the brink of divorce into a blueprint for boldness. She's the host of Bossy Big Sis podcast. Brandi Linn isn't isn't just a regular guest. If you ever ask yourself, am I totally broken? Am I totally gone? Is there any hope for me? You're about to find out that pain might just be your pulpit. So, Brandi, how are you?
So good. Thank you for the introduction. I'm
Yes.
excited to be here, and I'm always excited to share my testimony because I think that sometimes as Christians, as not as maybe unbelievers, people may have a perception that things are just always rainbows and butterflies, and that's not the case even when you are a believer. So I'm excited to chat with your audience.
You know, um, as I read something that you wrote, and it says that sometimes your calling is part of all the hard stuff that you go through is really a voice to your calling. So take us back to that moment when, everything seemed to, just fall apart. Tell us,
Mhm.
tell us.
Mine was a compilation of several pretty big moments, kind of just building up to on top of each other. When I was
Mhm.
28, my boys were 1 and 3. I was married to my husband. I had to undergo brain surgery, which was very sudden, very unexpected, and that was over Christmas time. I ended up in a coma for about 10 days and was at one point speculated that possibly I may not make it. My family was called in, and it just was a very horrific experience. When I came out of the coma, a blessing was that I was never on pain meds because I had been out for 10 days and able to kind of recover for that 10 days. But life following that was really challenging. You know, having a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old is hard enough as it is. But then having to heal and recover from brain surgery where I would need to sleep sometimes for 12 hours a day. And I had short-term memory loss, and it was just a lot of struggles. Immediately after that, within 6 months, I lost my job. I was the breadwinner for my family at that point in time. That was very hard. And then through that, my husband really developed a drinking problem that nearly cost us our marriage. He detoxed at home and then ended up in the hospital after several days. And God just miraculously healed him in that hospital. That's been more than a decade ago. We're still together now and have been sober ever since. I've never looked back. He never had rehab, he never had therapy. Any treatment program, he just was free from that addiction. And our lives really began to change, and we began to really not just say we believe in Jesus, but like really start living for Jesus. And so it was those moments, those horrible, hard times, years worth of struggle that really led me to the arms of Christ.
So were you a Christian before, or you just attended church? What was your?
I grew up knowing the Lord, like my family believed. We would go to church on like Christmas and Easter type of thing. And then my parents' marriage was struggling when I was in high school, and they started going to church, and my sisters and I had to go also. By that time, I was 16. I was already really living in a lot of sin. but those seeds were still being planted. And so all those years I believed. And then when my husband and I got married and had kids, we started going to church just because we thought that that's what you're supposed to do. And God was working on me, and I was starting to understand a relationship with him. But at that point, it was still very one-sided. It was a lot of me saying, God, this is the problem that I'm in, and I need you to get me out of it. Like, and I promise if you get me out of it, I'm never going to XYZ again. Do you know what I mean? And so it was very transactional. Um,
Like an
and so it
ATM
wasn't.
machine. Like an
Yeah.
ATM machine.
Yeah. Yeah. A genie in a bottle.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, but I believed, but so does Satan. Satan knows the Lord is real,
Yes, a lot of people don't
right?
realize that.
Right. So,
Yes.
I was no better, really. So yeah.
Yeah. That's deep. So, did you ever ask yourself why me with all the things that you went through and they were just like one after the other, no breathing space? Did you ever ask God why me? And if so, what did he say to you? What was the answer did you get?
This is maybe not the answer that you would expect, but I don't know that I asked that because my childhood started getting hard pretty early on. My teenage years were really hard, and that was just my normal. Struggling was my normal. And compartmentalizing how I feel and what I'm going through to get to where I want to go was just my normal. So I really didn't ask God why because it was just normal for me to kind of be in chaos. And it's like I didn't realize how much chaos I was living in until I was no longer living in chaos. I do remember there was a point in time where we were getting counseling from a pastor, and my husband really wasn't participating in the therapy. And I went to the pastor one Sunday at church and said, "I'm leaving my husband. I'm getting a divorce." And he looked at me and was like, "You cannot do that." And I really thought that day that I was like going just asking for a blessing. I thought he would be like, "I don't blame you. He's kind of been a jerk and doesn't really participate in the therapy." Um, and that might be a time that I was like, what? Like, what do you mean? Why? Why? And I don't think that I fully understood why. And I really don't think I didn't have examples of great marriage. The life that we live now is not what I would have dreamed of. And so I wasn't even picturing that. I just knew that God was telling me to do something and that I was just going to be obedient, even though it was really hard. And so I just kind of locked in on that. And it was during that period of time that I learned what it means to go to war for your family and what it means to pray and what it means to surrender things that you love to the Lord.
Okay. So, did you have like a mentor or everything was just divine? Did you have like a person mentoring you?
I had I had great people in my life. I wasn't fully honest with everybody because the Christians that I had that I was kind of developing relationships with, which were through a company that I was part of, I didn't tell them everything because their life seemed so perfect. And I remember even going to MOPS, if you're familiar, Moms of Preschoolers, it may be called something different now, but I went to that meeting the week that my husband was detoxing. I probably hadn't slept for 24 hours, but I had an obligation at that meeting. I think I probably had to bring a covered dish or something, so I still showed up because I like keep a commitment.
Right.
And even that day, I didn't tell anyone what was going on because I just thought none of them are know what this like they're going to judge me. They're not going to None of them are going through this. Like they go home to their good perfect families doing their good perfect things and their good perfect lives and they're never going to understand what I'm walking through. And so I had people encouraging me and speaking life into me, but a lot of this what I was keeping it secret. And then my people in my life who, like family members, if I would be honest with them, I feel like they were more like, yeah, you should leave him. That divorce in my family was very normal. And so I didn't say a lot to them because I didn't think that's what I was supposed to do. And so a lot of this really, truly was me and the Lord.
Yes, that's the thing about when you when you tell your parents anything about your marriage, it it sort of get murky because as parents, you want your best for your child, and you don't want to see the
Mm-hmm.
child suffering. You don't want to see the child in pain. So clearly, you're gonna say, get out of that nonsense or whatever it is. But then
Mm-hmm.
again, when the relationship heals and you get back together, they are still upset.
Mm-hmm.
They still have,
Mm-hmm. 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 When really, as parents, we need to recognize that things like that going on in our children's lives are that it is spiritual. It is spiritual warfare. Like, of course, the enemy would like to divide a family. Of course, the enemy would like to come in and rip apart a
exactly.
marriage. You know what I mean? And so we have to, I hope that when my boys are old enough to be in that season, that I can try to stay focused on that and knowing that literally if there are problems in their marriage, it is spiritual warfare and that they are one and I need to approach it as if they are one and not like her against him. Even though I'm a boy mom and in my natural I would want to be very mama bear ish, but we have to recognize that it's truly spiritual warfare.
Yeah, you have to pray for them. And like I have a son and I say, whatever is going on there, you guys see if you can sort it out. I pray for you, but don't get yourself in any trouble. If you think it's too overwhelming for you and you can't manage it, walk away. Yeah, always have a home here.
Mm-hmm.
My home is my home. I always tell my children, don't care what happens in life, you always have a home here. You're not alone,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yeah.
So I was encouraging them along that way. So tell us about the boutique and this bold business move that you made. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so my husband got sober literally overnight. I mean, he just came home from the hospital and the addiction was gone and he's never looked back. And it's, as I said, it's been more than a decade. Just a few years, several years after that,
Mhm.
we got the idea that I would start a clothing boutique. That would mean that I would leave another company, which felt uncomfortable. Um, and it didn't make sense at the time. But again, something that I've noticed is a theme of obedience in my life and just like doing what God calls me to do, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it doesn't make sense. Um, and so I stepped out and I did it. And the first weekend that we were open, we did like $10,000 in sales, which I thought I would do. That was like my goal at the end of the year. Do you know what I mean? So to do that in a weekend was like, okay, Lord, I see you. And he just continued to move in that for 6 years. I had it totally online. We did more than $2.5 million in sales over that time and debt free and profitable. And the way that God just like showed up in that business and used me to minister to women through their clothes and through their outfits and through this little online boutique was just really cool in the ways that we were able to give as a family to organizations that are close to our hearts and to different ministries was something that I would have never imagined being able to do and was one of the greatest blessings of that business. And then God called me just about a year ago to close that, which was another time of like just not really making sense, but just trusting and doing, what He calls me to and what He leads me to. And so I'm kind of still in that season of just like
Being
anticipating
still.
what God has next. Yeah, being still, which is really hard for me to do.
So,
I'm like not still very well. So,
so was this boutique basically Christian items or
no,
just,
not
oh, okay,
it
all
was
right.
all women's clothes, but it was very Christian branded. And I did live sales every single day. And the start of every live sale was the same. It was like, guys, hi, I'm so excited that you're here. Like, I hope that when you put your clothes on, when you grab them out of the mailbox and you put them on your body, you hear my voice reminding you that you were made in God's perfect image, that you were
Okay.
fearfully and wonderfully made. And so it was just a lot of like me just speaking encouragement and God's truth. And I was online every day with my audience live. And so I could develop relationships with people through live sales. And so I would know what was going on in their lives and I could pray for them. And they trusted me. And it just was really a community and a ministry arm for me too, truly. So,
It's beautiful. That's beautiful. So the bossy big sister vibes.
yes. So that is the podcast that I started right after I closed the boutique. And that's been something that's been on my heart forever. But the boutique business is a really busy, very fast-paced business. And there just was no time for anything else. So when I closed that, it kind of opened the door for me able to step into podcasting, which I've done now for just a little over a year. And I absolutely love it. I love just being able to connect with women, to empower women, to strengthen women, to see women where they're at. I really believe, probably because I didn't grow up following the Lord and what my perceptions were of Christian women were not accurate. But I think that's what a lot of people feel, that like the Christian, you can't tell the Christians things because they're either going to judge or they don't get it because their lives are rainbows and butterflies. And so on the podcast, I talk about everything that we would want to talk about as women that sometimes when you're sitting at church, you don't feel like you can talk about. And I really feel like that is where God can move and healing can happen and breakthroughs can happen because we're getting real. Like we're taking masks off and we're just being real women, open to God, like moving in our lives. So I love the podcast.
So who's that woman that you're talking to when you do the podcast?
I know that I'm talking to a lot of believers, for sure. And so I know that I'm strengthening the heart of the believer. But I also know I did 7 years of jail ministry, which I loved. And I know there are women who, just because sometimes my vibe will be a little more loud, my clothes are loud, my backdrop is leopard print, right? So like, I know that there are things about me that catch attention and that allow me like connection points that whether you're a believer or not, we could connect
Right.
over
Right.
simple little things. And so I use that to be able to connect with women who maybe aren't believers, to bring them into the conversation and to have an open, honest conversation in a way that will minister to their heart and in a way that opens the door for them to be like, oh, okay, well, if God moved in her life, and this is the mess she just told me about, and that was, this is a struggle she just had last week or whatever, then God could move in my life. And so I know that it starts stirring hearts, and that is truly my has
Has there been any particular conversation, with you being a host that really, really got to you? Any conversation with any of the women that you minister to that
like that bothered me or that touched me.
that touched you? Yes.
On the first Friday of the month, I do Strong Women episodes. I was doing them weekly, and those episodes are bonus episodes where I feature a guest and she's sharing a story where she has just overcome through Jesus. And so there's not one of those stories that doesn't blow my mind, because these women are being real and raw. And I tell them before we record, you say like the truth. You tell exactly what you were walking through. You tell exactly what you
Right.
experienced. You share exactly how God showed up and moved. And these stories are ones of abuse and addiction and homelessness and demonic possession over people's bodies. And I mean, pretty wild stuff that like people walk through. And so every one of those stories, I'm just like mind blown at how God has moved in these women's lives. And not just that, he's pulled them out of trenches, but also use their story and their testimony to be a vessel then that goes and empowers and strengthens other women in Jesus' name. And that is so cool to me.
Right.
So
Right,
I
right,
love
right,
those episodes. Yeah.
right.
And then my audience likes, I've had a sexpert on where we're talking about your marriage and
Yeah,
sex.
I thought
And that's
I wonder if it's the same person. What's her name?
the Christian sexpert. Is her
Yeah,
name?
yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
I had her over. She's good.
Yeah.
She's good. I
Yeah.
had her on too.
But those are conversations that sometimes, especially in the church, we're like not talking about that stuff. And you know what? That stuff, the world is talking all about it. You know what I mean? So, as believers, we really need to do a better job at leading that conversation. And my audience, even though they weren't as vocal on social media, the analytics prove that there were a lot of listeners to those episodes. And what's funny is that the downloads were high, the listens were high, but the comments were low. And that tells me there's still like a stigma around it. Do you know what I mean? Because people didn't want to
Yeah.
speak up and ask the questions or chime into the conversation. And
Mhm.
that's okay. And we're just, I'm bold enough to talk about the things that maybe some people wouldn't be. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've had discussion about abortions because the thing about it is that everybody isn't born in a, as you correctly say, in a Christian household. Everybody have, even if you're born in a Christian household, everybody have things that they have to go through. Sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
you're rebellious and, sometimes things happen and persons might get pregnant, they're not able to, for whatever reason, want to carry or, and they have abortion. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes these are the same women that have issues conceiving and then they blame themselves and
Mm-hmm.
they all kind of things going through their mind. So it's something that has people have to talk about it.
Right.
I know that
Right.
yes, you've done it, but God's gonna forgive you. I mean, you
Yeah.
can't be doing it every time, but
Right.
but if you genuinely confess and He see that you're remorseful and
Mm-hmm.
repent and all of that, He will forgive you. But
Mm-hmm.
they don't speak about these in the church, and things
Mm-hmm.
like this happen.
Mm-hmm.
As I said before, persons had life before becoming a Christian.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So those episodes are always very high downloads for my
Hmm.
audience.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. So why you think that mental wellness is still a taboo for Christians, women?
um, I feel like my opinions on this are maybe unpopular, but that's okay. I think there are
This
two
is
different,
your truth. This is your
right,
truth. So speak your
right.
truth.
I think there are, there's still the stigma around mental wellness or mental illness that is like very taboo, that it's like embarrassing or shameful. I do think that's changing for sure in our world. But I think a lot of times as believers, we have all the faith, but we lack the action. And faith is action. And
Hmm.
we have to, I think, get to a place, and this is not just with mental wellness, this is really with everything, where like we have to walk out the things that we say that we believe. And when it comes to our mental wellness, there are specific scriptures that tell us how to strengthen our minds, how to make ourselves well. And I think in the church, we need to do a better job of actually equipping people with, okay, but how, right? Like be anxious for nothing. Okay, but how? Like, and just to pray, 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 pray. Like, yes, we know that prayer works. We know that God hears, but like there are practical things that we can do as well that can strengthen our minds and that can improve our mental wellness and our physical wellness and our emotional wellness and our spiritual wellness and all the things. So I think we're making huge progress, but I don't think we're there fully.
This is like all God put different persons and people have different skill sets and and gifts that he has given. And if you're in a situation where you find that you can't cope, yes, you pray and all that, but seek help. Seek help from
Yes.
somebody
Yes.
God has given the gift to help you.
Yes. You have to take action, whether it's getting a therapist, taking a supplement. I mean, simple things like taking a walk, going out in the sunshine, drinking enough water, getting enough sleep, eating whole foods, like things like that are shown to impact our mental health. And I think a lot of times we neglect those very simple things and we're like, we're just going to pray that God moves. And then, but we're not doing any of these simple things that He has right in front of us for us to be able to do to help ourselves. And so, yeah.
It's like when you pray, people, I mean, sometimes people don't eat healthy and they pray. Yes, God will heal you, but something has to change. Not going to heal you 25 times. You know, you have to
Right.
change something
Right.
to keep the health, whatever the healing that he did for you.
Right, right. And it's hard. I mean, taking that active role is difficult for sure. But it's necessary. Faith is action, and we have to walk out what we say we believe.
Well, one of the things we say that we figure that our body is the temple of the Lord. So if our
Mhm.
bodies are temples, we're supposed to keep the temple,
Yeah.
in a certain condition. You
Right,
know what I mean?
right, right. Our life is God's most precious investment.
Oh,
So, like, what are we doing to steward well this investment of the Lord, right? Our body, our life, not just our physical wellness, but like everything. Like, what are we doing to steward it well? And I think we have to ask ourselves those questions and be comfortable with the answers that we, get back because they may not be what we want to hear, but that's not a bad thing. And that shows us kind of like where we need to move in different directions or take different steps or seek additional help.
my last question. What part of your story you think God is still writing?
I mean, I really try to love every season that I'm in. I have teenagers, they're 15 and 17. My marriage is so great. Like, we're loving life right now, but it's obviously the what's next and closing the boutique and coming off of such a high stress, fast pace, and big dollars and lots of excitement. And then being in this kind of more still space for me, I know that God's still moving in that. And I know that there are some things that He is like positioning me for, which is exciting, but I don't have the full vision of what that is going to be, which I typically do have the picture. So this is a different season for me, but also it's exciting because any time that God has called me to something, it's been really great. Not necessarily easy, but just really great. Like I've never been like, oh, shouldn't have followed the Lord. Like I'm always really glad that I have followed the Lord. So that's what I'm trying to do still in this kind of slower season.
Well, you know that when you read the Bible, all these things that God tells people to do, he sends them out. He shows them the beginning, he shows them the end, but he doesn't show them the middle. You know why? Because if they saw the middle, they would want to go. They say, forget about it. I'm not going anywhere.
It it's a roller coaster for sure.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So tell our listeners how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, so you can connect with me on my podcast, obviously, which is the Bossy Big Sis. I'm on all of the main podcast platforms. You can also find me on social media at the Brandi Linn on Instagram or Facebook, or I think that's my handle on TikTok too. Although TikTok is kind of just for funsies. So if you just want to have funsies, that's where you can find me. But I'm in all of those places. And then my
Yeah.
website is also thebrandilynn.com. Specifically, if you feel like that you wanted more information about being a guest on the podcast or coaching with me as well, because that was a part of the story that I left out. But I am also a business coach. Once I
Okay.
closed the boutique, I do business coaching now for other business owners. So, and you can connect with me on the website for that.
Okay. So, Brandi, you've given us raw truth, holy fire, and a roadmap towards unshakable confidence. So, all our listeners, you might not feel qualified by your pain, but you're being prepared by your pain.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Amen.
Thank you so much
Thanks
for
for
being
having
part of
me.
it. Modern Titus to Women's Journey. Thank you so much.
Bye.